Agela El-Jumaidi had a splitting headache the day that I first brought the camera to the site. Normally happy to engage in playful banter or teasingly reprimand one of the young men on the team for a crude comment, today she looked miserable, repeatedly pressing her index finger and thumb to her forehead and creasing her eyebrows together. As I started to explain why I had brought the camera, that I was hoping they would take photos using it, that the purpose was to see what they were interested in recording and documenting, Agela responded with uncharacteristically curt assent. I assumed that, at least for today, she wouldn't want to participate, especially when she stated directly that she would be going home early that day. But when I put the camera down in the center of the mat where we were all sitting, she picked it up immediately. She asked what each button on the apparatus did and practiced using them all. She told me that her favorite part of participating in our project was constantly learning new skills, and that she was happy to learn how to use the camera for the first time. Unsatisfied with learning how to turn the camera on and off, how to review and delete photos, how to access the menu, and what all the settings were, Agela asked me to show her how to use the zoom. Having mastered the technological aspects of the machine, Agela left the excavation site and began taking numerous pictures, returning once in a while to ask for further directions on using the camera or for feedback on the pictures she was taking. For 8 weeks on the contemporary excavations at the Temple of the Winged Lions in Petra, Jordan, and for 6 weeks at Çatalhöyük, Turkey, I gave 4 locally hired site workers at each site a camera and asked them to document the aspects of the project that they were most interested in and knowledgeable about. By the time that I began this photography initiative in late March and July 2015, respectively, I had spent a great deal of time getting to know and interviewing them, and they were familiar with the goals of my overarching project, namely that I was interested in the unique forms of expertise and knowledge that local archaeological laborers possess compared to that held by the archaeological team. And now I was looking for a way for them to contribute that knowledge in a non-traditional way through alternative narrative to the archaeological record. Choosing to experiment with photography as a strategy for recording and preserving that unique knowledge came from a combination of practical and theoretical considerations. Most of the site workers I met were not fluent in English and so could not participate in any recording strategies requiring English language abilities to be incorporated into the rest of the site records in the excavation archive. Similarly, many people could not read or write. On the project in Petra, in fact, recognizing that some team members were unable to sign their names to accept their week's wages catalyzed the project to change its system of payroll. Any recording method relying on literacy, then, would continue to exclude a large number of local laborers. On a more conceptual level, an inclusive recording strategy should place as few limitations as possible on both the content and the structure of how site workers express their perspectives on the excavation process. Even for those capable of reading, writing, and communicating in the language used in the rest of the project documentation, filling in the blank spaces on traditional pro forma, or being asked the conventional questions posed within excavation recording systems, solicits information, observations, and narratives about the same aspects of the archaeological project that are documented through traditional recording media. In order to encourage site workers to record both their new and different knowledge about the usual subjects examined through archaeological work, as well as what they know about different, under-examined topics, an intervention for inclusive recording needs to be maximally flexible and adaptive, while still capable of being easily incorporated into excavation and archival workflow. Photography fit both of these criteria. It has been a crucial component of archaeological research and publication for more than 100 years, while having served in many contexts outside of archaeology as an emancipatory technology giving voice to underrepresented groups around the world because of its ability to be used dynamically and creatively. The low barrier to entry in terms of both cost and difficulty to learn, the capacity to capture nearly limitless views on any given subject, the easy integration into the archaeological process, and the demonstrated potential for photography to contribute to confronting long-standing power dynamics all influence the decision to experiment with photography as a means for engaging locally hired laborers in the recording stages of archaeological research. There are, of course, other technologies and techniques which could conceivably accomplish the same set of goals. These characteristics of photography, though, make it an extremely appropriate medium on both a pragmatic and a theoretical level for engaging and preserving the alternative narratives and the unique expertise and knowledge that locally hired site workers possess at Çatalhöyük, at Petra, and elsewhere. In Petra, on one cool day in March, I was grateful for the hot, sweet tea in the early morning, when the sunlight was still gentle and warming, had not yet pierced through the clouds and the breeze to scorch us. One of the young Bedouin men who led tourists on donkey rides around the site trotted up to our excavation area astride his gray donkey, a nearly identical one in tow. He hopped off the saddle swiftly and casually, letting go of the rope used to lead the donkey, who simply began nibbling lazily at the scrubby plants around us. Agela rinsed out the tea glass she had been using and filled it, giving it to this man who frequently came to the site at this time. As she handed the glass to him, Agela's eyes locked onto something over his shoulder quite a distance away. She motioned urgently to me, asking me to give her the camera. I detached the Velcro of the camera case hastily and slipped the small black machine into her hand. Agela stood up and slowly, silently walked away, far away. She moved easily around the boulders and cobbles that littered her path until she was about 20 feet away from us. Then, she took out the camera and took several photos, turning the camera horizontally and angling it around rocks to get the shot she wanted. Then she returned triumphantly. "Harthun," our visitor explained when she showed him the videos. "Can you believe she saw a lizard from all the way over here? She has Bedouin eyes." Bedouin eyes were exactly what I was hoping that introducing a camera into our daily excavation operation would reveal, a specifically local way of seeing and scrutinizing and understanding the site and its environment. Agela's ability to see this lizard, camouflaged as it was and from such a distance, comes from a lifetime in Petra, observing the changing landscape, memorizing the terrain, and remarking on anything out of the ordinary. She looks upon the land, and therefore on the archaeological remains embedded in that land, differently than someone not native can. Her view, her vision, her perspective is all through Bedouin eyes, and the camera as a visual technology is well suited not only to capture images of lizards, but moreover to record the specific subjects, angles, and framing that make a local viewpoint different than a scientific, foreign, and archaeological one. After the conversation around Agela's Bedouin eyes, I was excited about what else she was seeing at the site, how she was using the camera to document this, and of course, how the photographic archive she was cultivating would differ from a traditional body of excavation photography. And most of the photos she was taking conveyed a coherent theme. By far, the majority of Agela's photos were of outward views, in all directions, from the Temple of the Winged Lions. These photos, created by Agela, represent an inversion of the more traditional photographs taken by archaeologists. Normally, of course, photographs taken for research purposes are of a site, of a landscape being surveyed, of specific deposits or objects that have been uncovered. But Agela's photos are taken from that site, from the monument, looking outward at the structures, roads, paths, and mountains all around. Rather than an intensive, close view of all the elements that make up an archaeological site under study, Agela's photos provide a panoramic, 360-degree context of everything surrounding that site, everything in its immediate environs, but outside the borders that delimit precisely what area is under study. As I reviewed the photographs which have been taken until now at Çatalhöyük, I was struck by the number of the photos in the archive of 3 of the men who participated in the photography trial I ran. Their physical contributions to the excavation at the site are not invisible. There are posed and candid shots, pictures in which they are smiling, relaxing, and laughing, as well as shoveling, straining, and sweating. But it was impossible to get a sense of what these men were experiencing, seeing, learning, or thinking from these photographs. They had not contributed in any way to the documentary record from Çatalhöyük, despite the great amount of investment that the project has put into community engagement more generally since its early seasons. But in reviewing the photographs that they created for our photography trial at Çatalhöyük, some sense of their experiences, sights, thoughts, emotions, and how they learned the excavation process does become clear. One consistent category of photos contributed by the site workers, which is dramatically underrepresented in the project's existing photographic archive, is pictures of equipment alone, especially of the equipment they use the most, such as the sieve, and the machinery and deposits as they move through the flotation process. These photos represent the most direct, unequivocal expression of the exclusive knowledge that site workers possess, in contradistinction to that of the archaeologists at Çatalhöyük, that the participants in this photography trial created. They provide insight into objects, places, and spaces that site workers predominantly occupy. There are furthermore far more photographs in the archive of the digging process than there are of either sieving or flotation, so these images fill out the positions and perspectives represented by the visual documentation of the project. They help to create a record that better, more inclusively encompasses the viewpoints and experiences of all who participate in creating archaeological knowledge at Çatalhöyük. In fact, their emphasis on objects was a broader theme across the pictures taken by site workers at Çatalhöyük during this period. With many of their photographs, even the ones that feature individuals or groups of people prominently, it is very difficult to confidently assert who or what is the main subject. Their photos are often ostensibly of a person, but that person is so decentered in the frame, overshadowed by the objects or archaeological remains filling the space around him or her, so underexposed or overexposed that calling this person the subject of the photograph feels like missing the point of the picture. On the other hand, the people in these pictures are not captured by accident. Their bodies and actions are fully accommodated within the limits of the frame. To say that the photos are really of the archaeological context that take up the majority of the photograph equally feels like a dismissal of the thoughtful choice to compose the photograph in a way that includes the people in the image and the work they are performing. This reflects a more abstract but significant contribution to the photographic archive that locally hired laborers are uniquely poised to make. Beyond photographing some new subjects, and more frequently documenting the areas of the excavation with which they are most familiar, the site workers are overall less constricted by the prevailing categories of archaeological photography that other research team members tend to recreate because of their disciplinary training as archaeologists. The decision to de-emphasize the person in the frame demonstrates the lack of a need to create a photo for either the academic scientific endeavor or for emotional personal memory making. While many of the site workers' photos stunningly recreate the viewpoints and stances exhibited in the photos previously created at Çatalhöyük, illustrating their knowledge and awareness of how the archaeological team usually takes pictures of the people, places, and things on the excavation, the photographs that minimize people and those that document solely equipment meanwhile reflect site workers' willingness to step away from the conventions they have observed and build up alternative categories of photographic documentation. The photographs that the site workers at Petra and Çatalhöyük created represent alternative narratives of the excavation process. On a fundamental level as well, the site workers' participation in making photos fills a political gap, one of representation, in which they have previously been looked at but their own views have not been invited or incorporated. Photography represents an adequately flexible medium for encouraging new and alternative perspectives on the archaeological process, one that seems to convincingly correspond to the nature of the expertise that site workers possess. It aids in creating a comprehensive, multidimensional vision of the research process, an essential component of building scientific knowledge, while also performing a role in redefining the politics of representation to include locally hired laborers not just as subject matter for photos, but also as the creative producers of them. But if any recording strategy is going to successfully engage a wider range of excavation participants in the recording process, those participants must be receptive at least, and hopefully excited to take part in the strategy. When I first suggested the recording experiment to the group of site workers at both sites, no one had any questions about the impetus behind implementing this photography initiative. I did receive a few questions, however, that were more technical in nature, and I think betray something about the relationships between archaeologists and site workers that occur normally on sites like these. One of the men at Çatalhöyük looked nervous at first and asked me what happens if we break the camera. I assured him that they would not be held responsible, that they wouldn't have to pay for any damage to the equipment. And then, the group of site workers looked at one another, and one of them asked, "When do we start?"